Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I am Kristen Welker in Washington, where we are following multiple breaking news stories at this hour. After some dramatic moments on the House floor this afternoon, Mike Johnson was reelected as the Speaker of the House, and the 119th Congress is now open for business. Johnson technically won the election on the first ballot after receiving 218 votes, the bare majority necessary to be elected Speaker. Now, we are also expecting an update from Las Vegas. Officials any minute now from authorities in Las Vegas as they work to determine the motive behind a cybertruck explosion outside a Trump hotel on the Vegas Strip on New Year's Day. We will bring you that press conference as soon as it happens. But we are going to begin on Capitol Hill, where, as we said, there is now a new House Speaker. In the end, 218 Republicans voted for Johnson. But to get it done, Johnson needed to twist some arms. After the clerk called the roll, Johnson came up short. 3 Republicans did not vote for him, and he could only afford to lose 1. But the vote wasn't officially gavelled closed, and after some wrangling, 2 holdout Republicans changed their votes.
Therefore, the Honorable Mike Johnson of the state of Louisiana, having received a majority of the votes cast, is duly elected Speaker of the House of Representatives for the 119th Congress.
We're going to have more on that in just a moment, but we want to get right to Las Vegas, where officials there are holding a news conference to update us on that cybertruck explosion.
The first one of those priorities was to confirm that there's no further threat. I think we've completed that. The second was to positively identify the suspect. We've also done that today. I can confirm that that is Matthew Livelsberger. We also wanted to confirm that there were no other actors involved in this incident. I believe we've done that, and you'll hear much more about that as we move forward today. We've also today, I'm going to be able to share with you some of what we believe to be his plans and motives as to why he conducted this attack. Now, before we go on, I want to just address a couple of things before we get too far along here. I want you to know that we're very well aware of a podcast that is going around today and the contents of the letter in that podcast. And I just want you to understand that since we've been conducting these press conferences, I have only given you information that we have verified and deemed to be factually accurate. We've been aware of that document for a while now, and we still have not completely gone all the way through that and verified that entirely. We are in one of the 2 telephones and 1 laptop. So 1 telephone and 1 laptop that we still have not been able to get into. There is 1 cell phone that we are getting into, and I can tell you that we are barely scratching the surface and almost hourly receiving additional information requiring substantial investigative effort on the part of this joint investigation between ourselves, the FBI, and the ATF. And so, again, while I understand all of that is out there, I believe it is our responsibility to give you what we know to be a fact, and that is what I will continue to do as we move forward. A couple of questions came up in regards to the positive identification of the suspect in the vehicle. I want to give you a couple of photographs as to what it was that we had some conversation around, because there's some tattoo comparisons that we needed to do. And in those tattoo comparisons, in this particular photograph, you can see a tiger tattoo, and there's a secondary tattoo on the stomach that the wife had told us about. You can see that some of it is burnt, some of it is not burnt, and while the body was still in the vehicle, we were unable to identify those specific tattoos until we were able to remove some of it. Secondarily to that, there's also a surveillance photograph that we obtained of our subject in Colorado wearing that very distinctive brown jacket. You'll see that a little bit later here in some of the photographs that one of the assistant sheriffs is going to talk to you about. There's also a lot of conversation that I hear out there about the fact that the identifications, the credit cards, and the number of things that I provided to you previously did not show up as burnt in the explosion in the vehicle. And so I did think it was important for me to address a couple of those issues so you understand where we're at. That's a photograph of the wallet. It's a leather wallet. Clearly, it's burnt up pretty well. However, That wallet was found in the back seat under some debris in the vehicle, and it contained, you'll see in this photograph, the credit cards, a photograph, and a number of other pieces of identifying information. The military identification that I initially told you about was also located within inches of the wallet. And you'll see much of this stuff does have some burn damage on it. The passport that I described to all of you was found in the back, in the bed of the truck under debris as well, and you'll see a photograph of that in there. I also had mentioned to you that we were going to be doing dental records to identify the subject in the vehicle. The Department of Defense provided those dental records to us. We then forwarded them to the coroner, and the coroner also provided a positive identification for us. Finally, we had also requested DNA from the family, which was provided to us, and it matched to our suspect. We then, of course, had now confirmed fully his identity to you. There has been, again, a tremendous amount of investigative effort that has been conducted now, and I'm going to introduce to you Assistant Sheriff Dory Corrin to go over some of the extensive investigation that has occurred. Dory?
Good afternoon. I'm Assistant Sheriff Dory Corrin. I oversee our Homeland Security and Investigative Services Group, which includes our counterterrorism unit that's been working around the clock on this investigation. I just want to briefly share a few updates on some key areas to include the operational activity that led up to this incident, a little bit of information on the post-blast investigation as we know it today, and then finally some of the information that we're discovering most recently about motives and plans to give you some insight on why this individual committed the act that he committed. To begin, just with the operational activity, the sheriff yesterday talked about the route that the suspect took to get to Las Vegas. We used a lot of this information to be able to track down video surveillance footage around different locations, as well as financial records, as well as call data records, as well as looking at the Tesla charging stations to be able to determine exactly which route the individual took, but more importantly, that it was the individual that we've identified, as well as the only individual in the vehicle during the path that he took to Las Vegas. As you'll see here in this video here at one of the charging stations, there's just one example. You'll see our suspect here. He'll exit the vehicle. He'll walk around the vehicle at different times. At one point, you're going to see that he opens the door of the vehicle. He retrieves a coat. He puts that coat on, and you're going to see that at different parts to include the photo that the sheriff talked about just a few minutes ago. We use this video information as well as what I said earlier about the financial records in terms of purchases being made with different credit cards, call data records, a video canvas at multiple locations, trying to use all of that to corroborate that the individual that we've identified is the same individual that drove that Tesla during that route that we've identified to Las Vegas. In addition to that, we also talked about the phones that were recovered. There were 2 phones that we recovered from the vehicle. Both phones were damaged. We are still trying to access the data in one of the phones, but we have been fortunate in our team, which is second to none, has done a really good job accessing the data in one of the phones that was recovered. You can see the phone here in the vehicle. It's very burnt from the outside. You can see another image here. But we're able to take this phone and be able to extract the data using a variety of different tools. And in that, we've identified a variety of information, but one thing in particular is there was an application in there that the suspect used to take notes. In that application, one of the notes is titled Surveillance Log by the Suspect. It appears to be more of a journal of activity. It dates for about 10 days leading up to the incident, from December 21st to December 31st of this past year. In that surveillance log, or as we would like to call it, a journal, because it's more of a diary of activity that he's conducting, we identify multiple locations that match what we have in the route. We identify activity that we've matched. So, for example, him purchasing firearms, him purchasing camping equipment or other types of equipment that were used in this incident matched what our data showed in terms of the route and the video surveillance we were recovering along that route. Beyond the operational activity, I want to also get a little bit into the post-blast investigation. So make no mistake, this is a suicide vehicle-borne improvised explosive device, or short, it's a suicide VBID. We know also, as mentioned by the sheriff yesterday, there was a self-inflicted gunshot wound by the suspect. The coroner was very specific in their examination. It was an intraorbital gunshot wound. which essentially means that the suspect put the firearm in his mouth and discharged the gun, and ultimately the round came out to the left side of his head. In addition to that, in terms of our assessment of the post-blast to confirm that he's the only individual involved and the only individual in the vehicle, we did a variety of video and photo comparisons to match the clothing. So if you look here, for example, this is a video in Las Vegas, and you're going to see in a moment here where he parks the Tesla truck, he comes out, and you're going to see some descriptive clothing that matches some of the other video that we've recovered along the route. Please keep in mind, this is a very extensive investigation, so there's a lot of content for us to review and examine. We're just showing examples and samples as we get them. There's more information as we go through it. But in this video, you can see even the distinctive jacket that he is wearing in that vehicle. The other thing that's important is the sheriff mentioned yesterday that Tesla sent to us engineers to come to Las Vegas to help us extract data from the vehicle. Thanks to their support, we were able to extract an SDMI chip from the Tesla vehicle, and Tesla was able to confirm to us using the data from the vehicle that the vehicle was not in full self-driving mode at any time during this incident. Finally, the last category just to touch on is motive, which I know everyone is very eager to try to understand and be able to explain what happened. I'll reiterate what the sheriff said is we still have a large volume of data to go through and a lot of content to go through. As you know, with any one of our devices, there's thousands, if not millions, of videos and photos and documents and web history and all of those things that need to be analyzed. But with that, just as a preview for as we get information, we're trying to be as transparent as possible. There were a couple pieces of content we thought were important to share for now. One is in the note application, he seemed to have 2 letters. One letter in particular, as you can see here, this is an excerpt from that letter. He says, fellow service members, veterans, and all Americans, time to wake up. We are being led by weak and feckless leadership who only serve to enrich themselves. He goes on to explain a variety of other grievances and issues, some political, some personal, a variety of other things, which we will do our best to release very quickly here. But then there's a second letter where there's some more excerpts. This one seems to be dated after the fact in that notes application. And in there, you can read a couple of the excerpts. We are the United States of America, the best country, people to ever exist. But right now, we are terminally ill and headed towards collapse. This was not a terrorist attack. It was a wake-up call. Americans only pay attention to spectacles and violence. What better way to get my point across than a stunt with fireworks and explosives? Why did I personally do it now? I need to cleanse my mind of the brothers I've lost and relieve myself of the burden of the lives I took. I'd like to just also expand on that and understand that these are just excerpts. In there, he does offer additional information that is varying on the spectrum in terms of political grievances, issues about the conflicts elsewhere, not here, domestic issues, societal issues, a variety of other things, including personal challenges as well. We are intending to release those initial letters so people can understand the best they can what the person's thought process was at one point in time. However, please understand there is still a lot more content to go through, and that may change. There may be a lot more information that we recover that explains either more or shows a change in mindset at different times. Just before I turn it over to FBI Special Agent Spencer Evans, I just want to take a note and just mention what the sheriff said, which is our counterterrorism section and all of the people involved in this have been working around the clock 24/7, tirelessly, truly through the night. They are second to none, and we really appreciate everything they're doing. With that, turn it over to the FBI.
Good afternoon. My name is Spencer Evans. I serve as the Special Agent in charge of the FBI's Las Vegas division. I'd like to express gratitude for everyone that's here today, and especially the partnerships that Sheriff Corrin just highlighted. It's been seamless collaboration between the FBI, ATF, Army CID, Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. You know, if you walked into one of the command posts and someone's not wearing a uniform, you wouldn't be able to tell who works for which agency, and it's been outstanding collaboration. We do have significant updates that we're sharing with you from an investigative standpoint, but just want to reiterate, as Sheriff Corrin mentioned, There is still a lot of ongoing investigation. We have terabytes of data that we have to analyze. We have outstanding search warrants and subpoenas, interviews that are being conducted around the globe as we try to paint a comprehensive picture of exactly what happened. That being said, we do feel confident that we have a much better sense of how we arrived at the events of the 1st of January and additional information that we can provide. So I'd like to first begin by addressing something that continues to be widely speculated, whether or not there was any connection between what happened in New Orleans on New Year's Day and then the incident here in Las Vegas just a few hours later. Just to be clear, there is no evidence that these two events are connected. The only things that we have connecting them are incidental, what we believe to be coincidental similarities in that both vehicles were rented through the same service, that they were both subjects served in the military, that they both stayed at an Airbnb, things like that. We've identified no telephonic or email communication between the subjects, no information that suggests that they knew each other, that they ever served in the same unit, that they were ever assigned at the same place at the same time and had interaction, and no witness interviews have corroborated or provided any information that the two events are connected in any way. In similar fashion, we have not identified any connection between this subject and any other terrorist organization. During the FBI's international investigation to date, as I mentioned, we have interviewed family members, friends, the subject's associates, and military members that he served with around the globe. Through these interviews, we've found that the subject held no animosity towards the president-elect. That's something that's also been reported. Investigative steps have discovered, and information from the Army indicates, that he likely suffered from PTSD, and we are also aware that there were potential other family issues or personal grievances in his own life that may have been contributing factors. Again, we're looking into all of that. It's evident that the subject considered, planned, and thoughtfully prepared for this act alone. That's what we believe, and we have no information to the contrary at this point. The FBI has been able to confirm some of this through the utilization of video footage in public areas as he traveled from Denver to Las Vegas. We have video footage that shows that he is alone outside of the vehicle, and that corroborates, again, what Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department footage has also shown. The FBI, as the sheriff indicated, facilitated obtaining DNA from a family member that was able to be conclusively matched to confirm the subject's identity. As Sheriff Gorman mentioned, although this incident is more public and more sensational than usual, it ultimately appears to be a tragic case of suicide involving a heavily decorated combat veteran who is struggling with PTSD and other issues. Yesterday, I wanted to highlight, I mentioned a tip that was unverified that the FBI had received. Sheriff McMahon will talk about this. It's now floating around there on podcasts. This is a tip that the FBI received after the bombing occurred that seemed to describe some of the personal grievances that the subject may have held. We still have not conclusively determined that that's from the subject, but feel confident based on evidence that we're uncovering on his devices that that was in fact from Leivelsberger. I want to reiterate that, prior to this incident, the FBI did not have any information on this subject. He was not on our radar. He didn't have criminal history. There was nothing that we would have been looking into him for up until this point. Last thing I just wanted to highlight briefly is it's not lost on us. We understand that there were victims. While the subject himself was the only person that was deceased, there were several folks that were injured, and obviously any sort of incident like this has a traumatic impact on the greater community and folks that are rightly so going to be scared and concerned, and some people that were inconvenienced and some that were taken to the hospital with injuries. We'd like to remind everyone that we're working with Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department advocates, the Office of Emergency Services advocates, and the Southern Nevada Resiliency Justice Center to offer services to these victims. We recognize that there may be victims that are yet unidentified. So for those that might be suffering or otherwise impacted, we'd ask you to reach out to the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI. And in similar fashion, as we reiterated yesterday, anyone who has tips related to the subject or this particular incident, please call us at 1-800-CALL-FBI or submit a tip online at tips.fbi.gov. And with that, I'll turn it over to the Assistant Special Agent in Charge from the ATF, Kenny Cooper.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kenny Cooper. I'm an Assistant Special Agent with ATF San Francisco Field Division. I have some very quick resource updates. ATF has brought in some of our top experts from our national response team that will assist with the sifting through the debris of the Tesla. And that's an abundance of caution to make sure that we've got the initiation sequence identified as best we can from the evidence that survived the thermal event of this explosion, and to ensure that no other bad actors were involved in the initiation of that device. Also, my second update is to the firearms purchased by our subject on December 30th, 2024. Our ATF investigators were able to track down that lawful purchase at a gun store in Colorado. Our subject arrived in that gun store by himself on December 27th and initiated the ATF Form 4473 and actually paid for those two firearms that were recovered from the Tesla on the 27th and was sole occupant of a vehicle arriving and departing that on that date. And then on the 30th, we have video evidence of our subject entering that gun store as the sole occupant of the Tesla. He actually received and transferred those two firearms and took into his possession at that time and departed as the sole occupant in the Tesla. Those are the two updates that I'm here to provide to you at this time. Thank you.
All right, with that, we'll entertain a couple questions. If you could, please identify yourself, and we'll go from there. David?
David Charles, KLAS TV. Thanks for taking my question.
Sure.
Two quick questions. One, the video that you showed of him with the Tesla was able to extract that for you from the device, from the car. The video you showed him walking around and at the charging stations.
Yeah, so let me just, the question was, can we, the video that we show, sorry, I was standing back there, so I wasn't sure which one you were looking at, but the question is, the video that we showed at the Tesla charging stations, who provided that to us? I'll let Dory answer that.
Without getting too far into the technicalities, there are various components in there that were retrieved. The SDMI card, it was not where the video was retrieved from. That was where we got the data to be able to determine that it was not in self-driving mode. However, Tesla did provide and helped our team be able to recover the thumb drive that records other types of data to include video by the Tesla.
In what state is this in? Do we know?
Kingman, Arizona.
Second question is about the detonation. There's a lot of questions. How was he able to die by suicide and set this off? Can you just in very basic terms explain how that could happen to kind of stop these conspiracies that he's not?
Yeah, so the second question is how are we able to explain the detonation versus the suicide? And we just believe it to be simultaneous at the time of the detonation. But again, that's why the ATF's bringing in the SABTs from outside to look at what that sequence was for the initiation of the explosion as well. And, you know, it's very difficult to see inside of those Teslas, even with the camera angles that we have. And so we still remain challenged on finding some of that exact timing on all of that. Go ahead.
Hi, Stephanie Price, Fox News.
Hi, Stephanie.
Hi. We're seeing reports that he had another alias as Matt Berg and went on a TV show in 2013. Have you guys been able to confirm that?
So the question is if we knew of a alias of Matthew Berg and he had been previously on a television show. We've seen that reporting but have not verified that reporting. Behind you.
That's Kevin Knives with NBC News. How would you describe his state of mind in these final days, given everything that you read from his notes app and the manifesto that you see that you reference going around in the podcast? Have you guys been able to rule out that it was not from him, or is it still up in the air that it could have been from him?
So the question is, how would I describe his state of mind in the manifesto that was described on the podcast? Have we been able to determine whether that was from him or not? And I'll answer the first part is I'm not comfortable giving you state of mind just yet. I certainly am leaning a particular way, but again, I'd like to be factual to you. I think when you read the documents that we're going to give you a link to at the end of this press conference, that you can go in and make some of your own assumptions about what that is. But I will tell you that part of my hesitation on that is I know that we have a lot more documents and number of things for us to uncover, and so I want to be able to provide to you only the factual information when I have it. And so I'm not gonna opine on what I believe his state of mind was at that particular time, but certainly you can see some troubling aspects in his personal life as well. And I don't know if you want to address the second part, Mr. Spencer.
Yeah, so in terms of the so-called manifesto that's circulating online, we have strong evidence to suggest that it was the subject that wrote it, but we haven't conclusively proven that yet. And that evidence relates to other evidence that we're finding that we're able to compare that lead us to believe it was in fact him who sent it.
J1?
Do you have an update
Is it J1?
Yes, J1 from 13. Do you have an update on the conditions of the other people who were injured?
The question is, do I have any updates on the conditions of the people who were injured? And I'm told that they're all relatively minor injuries, and they've all been released from the hospital.
Kristen Drummond with News 3. As you were showing us these experts, can you say why definitively he chose the Trump International Hotel and why he decided to come here to Las Vegas?
Yeah, the question is, with the excerpts that we showed, can we definitively identify why he chose the Trump Hotel Tower location as well as Las Vegas? And the answer is no. In fact, I think when you read through some of that, you might find that there were some other considerations as well for other locations. We can't verify all of that at this point, and so that's why I haven't talked about that publicly.
Do you know what other locations he was considering, and were they here in Nevada?
There was one location in Grand Canyon that was specifically talked about there, but we haven't been able to verify anything as well. All the way in the back.
Berenice Zúñiga with Univision Las Vegas. Thank you for taking my question. In regards to what happened in New Orleans, I know that you guys mentioned it's a coincidence, but what main evidence makes it different to what occurred over there? That it's not being considered a terrorist attack case.
So the question is why don't we consider what happened in New Orleans and what happened in Las Vegas connected? And the simple answer to that is we don't find anything to actually point us in that direction. There are those coincidences that we have spoken very openly about, but we have not found throughout this entire investigation anything that ties the two attacks directly together. Go ahead in the back.
I had a question. Were you guys able to identify the type of explosives that were in the vehicle and where he would be able to find those?
So the question is, were we able to identify the types of explosives that were in the vehicle and where he was able to find those? There's a mortar-type fireworks in the back of the vehicle, some camping fuel, and we do know that it looks like from that document that we're going to provide to you that he may have stopped outside of a location in New Mexico and obtained those fireworks legally. But that is another aspect of the investigation that continues. Hi, Noble.
You have been listening to officials in Las Vegas update the public on their investigation into that New Year's Day attack, that cybertruck that exploded outside of the Trump property there. A couple of key headlines just to flag for you that we heard from the sheriff there. They have confirmed, in fact, the identification of the person who was inside that vehicle as Matthew Leifelsberger. They are calling this, according to the FBI, a tragic case of suicide. They do not believe there were any other actors involved in this incident, and they do not believe that there is any further threat. They also, you just heard them say, do not, at this point in time, see any connection between the horrific attack that occurred in New Orleans on the same day, on New Year's Day. A couple of other key headlines. Just remarkable video that we saw of Leifelsberger, according to authorities, as he was driving from Colorado to Las Vegas at charging stations. There's that Tesla Cybertruck there. Essentially, this video showing the Cybertruck as he is essentially charging the Cybertruck, and they say that helped them to make this positive confirmation They also note that they have recovered some data from one of 2 cell phones that they recovered. One of the cell phones had a note application. They found 2 notes. One of them said, quote, "Time to wake up," calling the U.S. leadership weak and obsequious. A second letter said, quote, "We are the United States, but right now we are headed toward collapse." So again, saying that they do not believe that there is any connection between what happened in Las Vegas and New Orleans. Let's head now to NBC News correspondent Antonia Hilton, who's been following this story for us. She joins me now. Antonia, I laid out some of the top lines there. What were the key takeaways for you?
Yeah, I think what I would add to what you just laid out there, Kristen, is that this is now moving toward a story that I think is going to really center on his mental health, the PTSD that officials mentioned he likely was suffering with after serving his country. And they mentioned very vaguely that he may have had other interpersonal issues or mental health challenges that he was facing more recently as well. And so what they're describing is really a case of a service member mentally struggling and choosing to end his life in this horrific and very public way. I was also struck, as you were, by the contents of what they're starting to find on his phone, on the technology that they recovered from the charred car. And it's important, I think, too, to note that they mentioned they still have terabytes worth of data to go through. So we're kind of at the beginning of the iceberg, I think, of his state of mind, his beliefs. Certainly, they mentioned, for example, that he didn't seem to have ill will toward President-elect Trump. And that was a major question that a lot of reporters, locals had, certainly because of the symbolism, the visual of being in front of the Trump Hotel there in the city, and then to do this in a cybertruck, of course, associated with Tesla, with Elon Musk, someone who is in Trump's inner circle now. And so people were wondering, well, is this a political statement about the incoming administration? But it didn't seem like it was going that way. It seemed like he was perhaps starting to tell a story or his views about societal and political issues in the country that weren't necessarily focused on one political actor. I'll add a couple other quotes to what you shared, that he wrote, "We are terminally ill and headed to collapse." That he said that Americans only pay attention to spectacles and violence. And he mentioned, too, "I needed to cleanse my mind of the brothers I've lost." That's a reference, it seems, to people he served alongside with as a service member, and mentioned even lives that he took in service, too. And so, again, this is just the beginning still. They cautioned so much more to go through, Kristen.
Yeah, just extraordinary new details there coming to us from Las Vegas. Antonia Hilton, thank you so much for helping us break that down. We've actually got another piece of breaking news now to tell you about. Just moments ago, the judge in Donald Trump's New York hush money case denied Mr. Trump's motion to dismiss his case, ordering the president-elect to be sentenced on January 10th. Just 10 days before his inauguration, but signaling there will not be a recommendation that he serve jail time before, of course, he takes office. Joining me now is NBC News senior legal correspondent Laura Jarrett. Laura, take us through this order. What does this mean for the president-elect?
Yeah, Kristen, I think you can think about this in terms of the practical reality, which you just laid out, and sort of the optics of it, if you will. So just to take a step back here, remember, this is the case involving allegations that the former president directed his former fixer to pay off a porn star before the 2016 election. It is the only case of the 4 that he was facing at the time that went to trial, the only one where a jury convicted him, the only one where he was scheduled to be sentenced. But it had been sort of tied up in a legal mess for months now because his defense lawyers had tried to say, wait a minute, the Supreme Court said that there is some limited presidential immunity. Some of the evidence that came in at trial was problematic, so let's undo the entire conviction. Let's wipe out the whole thing. Let's get it all put to bed before Inauguration Day. The judge had been silent for several weeks now as we waited to see, and now he's just handed down this 18-page order, Kristen, essentially saying the conviction is going to stand. We think that that's the best way to sort of give credence to what the jury did, and that's the best way to serve the interests of justice. But at the same time, he says that he thinks it's his inclination not to impose any sentence of incarceration. He says he wants to give the parties a chance to make their case, to present their arguments as they were scheduled to do in a normal sentencing, but it's his inclination not to impose any jail time, essentially telling everybody, look, he wasn't going to go behind bars anyway, so I'm going to go ahead with that sentence. sentence. Now, you might say, well, what's the point of doing that if he wasn't going to get any jail time? The reason is that there's really not a lot of precedent for what to do here in a case like this when the jury has come down with a conviction and you have to impose a sentence as the law requires with some level of expeditious speed here. And so the judge has given him an option now to come and appear virtually if he should choose to do so. But he also has appeal routes here, Kristen. And so we might see that he runs into federal court and to try to get this entire thing blocked. Or he might just say, look, it's clear I'm not going to have any jail time. I'm going to go for it and just get this all done, get it all wrapped so it's not hanging over me when I'm out of office in 4 years.
Well, we know you will continue to track every twist and turn. Laura Jarrett, thank you for diving in front of a camera for us today on this day of big breaking news in a range of different areas. We really appreciate it. We do want to turn to the other big story that we are following in politics today. As we said at the top of the show, by the narrowest majority possible, Louisiana Congressman Mike Johnson was reelected to Speaker of the House on a lengthy first ballot today after two Republican holdouts changed their votes. After receiving the gavel from Hakeem Jeffries, the newly elected Speaker spoke on the House floor. Listen.
As heirs to the American Revolution and the descendants of patriots who defied tyranny, in the coming months, we are going to pass legislation to roll back the totalitarian fourth branch of government known as the administrative state. We're going to drastically cut back the size and scope of government. We're going to return the power back to the people. And in coordination with President Trump and his administration, we are going to create a leaner, faster, and more efficient federal workforce.
Now, the holdout members that flipped were South Carolina's Ralph Norman and Texas's Keith Self. We caught up with Congressman Self after the vote. He told us that he talked to the Speaker about the process to pass Trump's agenda priorities in the new Congress before changing his vote. He also said that he spoke to President-elect Trump a few times during the day, and they had a, quote, lively conversation. Big picture here, folks. Johnson's election is a major step forward for Republicans, but this is basically the legislative equivalent of tying your shoes, and the road ahead is likely to be much more difficult. Now, earlier today, as House Republicans voted for Speaker Johnson to lead their conference, I sat down with the new Senate Majority Leader, South Dakota Republican John Thune, who officially becomes his party's leader after 18 years of Mitch McConnell's stewardship. I asked him if he thought Johnson was the best person for the job. Here's what he said. As we are sitting here today, the House is choosing its next speaker. President-elect Trump has endorsed Mike Johnson to continue to serve in his role as Speaker in the House. Do you think that Mike Johnson is the best person to serve as the Speaker of the House? And what do you say to those who oppose him?
Well, I mean, I think the House is going to decide. I try not to interfere, and I'm not sure that my endorsement of anybody would be helpful. I try to stay out of the House's decision-making process over there. But I've worked closely with him. And in my experience, and I haven't, spent a lot of time with him just yet, but as I've sort of evolved into this new role, had an opportunity to see him in action, and I feel very confident that we could have a very strong working relationship if that's ultimately what the House decides to do.
Do you think he's been an effective speaker so far?
Well, I think he's got a really, really tough job, and yes, I mean, I think he has been responsive to his members. But he's got a lot of folks that are headed in different directions. I mean, as you know, that with a narrow margin like that, any individual member of the House of Representatives can have a huge impact. And I think what he has to do and has been doing is figuring out how to balance that. And I give him deference to how he runs the House. He understands the House. I don't. But I do think that they will need to be, and we will need to be as a Senate and with the White House, working closely as a team if we're going to get an agenda done that we want to accomplish for the American people.
Joining me now from Capitol Hill, where they've been tracking today's speaker voter, NBC News national political reporter Sahil Kapoor, and in West Palm Beach with the president-elect is senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez. Thanks to both of you for being here this afternoon. Sahil, let me start with you, of course, on Capitol Hill, where all of the action is. Mike Johnson has now been reelected as Speaker. It did happen on the first ballot, but boy, Sahil, that was a lengthy ballot. It was not without speed bumps. Congressman Norman and Self initially voted for other people. They then switched their votes after talking to Donald Trump. Talk about how this all went down.
Yeah, this is a relief for Mike Johnson and this narrow House majority, Kristen. It happened after quite a bit of drama where Mike Johnson, unlike Kevin McCarthy, didn't allow the vote to be gavelled or called and move to another ballot. He simply held it open while he figured out how to twist some arms and turn those defections. He initially had 3 Republicans who defected against him. One of them, Tom Massey, was so deeply dug in, he was always expected to vote no. But the other 2, Keith Self and Ralph Norman, were more persuadable, and he did ultimately persuade them. Now, it took some phone calls from Donald Trump to push them. And we spoke to both members. Keith Self said he had talked to Trump a couple of times, said they had a lively discussion. He declined to elaborate, but he said his initial opposition to Mike Johnson was about his frustrations regarding the 118th Congress that just ended. Norman also said he spoke to Trump, that Trump wasn't really an issue for him. He knew where Trump stood. He just wanted assurances that Johnson would fight on matters regarding the budget and the border, things that are important to Ralph Norman. And that's going to be a real big test for Mike Johnson going forward, how he governs with this narrow House majority. Finally, Kristen, I think it's very notable that 9 Republicans initially had hesitated, and they did so publicly. They didn't privately hesitate. The 3 defections and the 6 who didn't vote for Mike Johnson, it's notable because now the motion to vacate threshold to remove a speaker is going up under the new rules package from 1 to 9 members. They're sending Johnson a message here.
They certainly are. And boy, what a dramatic day, Sahil. Thank you so much for breaking all of that down for us. We really appreciate it. Let me go now to Gabe in West Palm Beach. Gabe, as we just laid out, President-elect Trump was involved in that drama today, helped get the ball over the finish line. What's the reaction been there with the president-elect and his inner circle?
Why there, Kristen? Well, not just involved. As Sahil just laid out, he was a huge part of it. He was actually golfing at the time. The first phone call when this was all unfolding actually interrupted his golf game. That's according to Ralph Norman. And it was Nancy Mace, the congresswoman, who called President-elect Trump. And that's when he got involved, started burning up those phone lines. That second phone call, he was on speaker phone with Mike Johnson and with the holdouts. So this is a key moment in the incoming Trump administration, Kristen. As you know, this was a critical test of Donald Trump's power over House Republicans. And although there was some drama there, largely he came out on top. There were these holdouts, but in the first ballot, Mike Johnson was able to pull it off. Now, President-elect Trump just a short time ago posted on social media congratulating Mike Johnson and basically saying that, look, this is the Trump agenda will now get underway. So Donald Trump and his team does feel like this is a huge win with him in South Florida here this afternoon, Kristen.
And Gabe, we're just getting moments ago a pretty fiery response from Steve Chung about that judge's order, Judge Merchan's order in New York to move forward with the sentencing date on January 10th, 10 days before President-elect Trump's inauguration. What is he saying?
Yeah, you were just breaking down the latest developments with Laura Jarrett. Well, just in the past few moments, we got that statement from Trump's communication director, Steve Chung, blasting the decision to move ahead with this sentencing, saying today's order by the, quote, deeply conflicted acting Justice Merchan and the Manhattan DA witch hunt is a direct violation of the Supreme Court's immunity decision. Now, Chung goes on to say that there should be no sentencing and President Trump will continue fighting against these hoaxes until they are all dead. So no surprise there, Kristen, that President-elect Trump's team fighting back considerably against this decision to move forward with the sentencing and reiterating its call that this is a political witch hunt by what they see as a, quote, deeply conflicted Judge Merchan. Kristen.
Yeah, pretty interesting. We'll have to see if they appeal that decision. Gabe Gutierrez covering all the angles for us. Really appreciate it, Gabe. Great to see you. And coming up, I will talk to a Republican congressman who was in the midst of the arm twisting and negotiations today about what's next for Congress and the Trump agenda and the Republican Party after House Speaker Johnson's nail-biting victory. That's next. And welcome back. We want to delve in more deeply into the developments on Capitol Hill. And joining me now to do that is someone who was seen by his side during today's vote, Republican South Dakota Congressman Dusty Johnson. Congressman Johnson, thanks so much for being here on a very busy day.
It is busy. I'm happy to be here.
Well, we're very happy to have you. There was a lot of back and forth and speed bumps before Congressman Norman and Self ultimately changed their vote to back House Speaker Mike Johnson's reelection. You were there. You were standing next to the Speaker when this all went down. What was discussed?
I think all of us want to make sure that we have less dysfunction in the next 2 years than has frankly been kind of standard in D.C. for the last 40 years. What we're all asking for is a more collaborative, more inclusive, and more conservative agenda. And so ultimately, when things came together, it was just getting a bunch of us who trust one another together to make commitments to one another that we're going to do this together rather than have these massive packages shoved down people's throats at the last minute.
You know, Speaker Johnson told our Ali Vitale that there were going to be no quid pro quos. He wasn't going to make any promises or commitments in order to win over votes. Did he hold to that, or did he have to make some commitments to get those members to change their minds?
No, I was so proud of Mike Johnson. He didn't do any horse trading. He understands this place has to run better. And he knew that a key part of that is making sure that you don't open the store. Oh, you get a committee slot, you get a committee slot, you get an office. That's the kind of distasteful stuff in Congress that people don't really love. So Mike Johnson was principled. He stuck to his guns. How can we make this place run better? He did not cut any deals with any specific concessions.
How would you describe the role that President-elect Trump played today? We know that he was working the phones. He spoke with Congressman Self, for example.
Yeah, this is a team sport, and Donald Trump's the quarterback of the team. And so he knew that he wanted to make it clear to people that, listen, it is time to get to work. If you numbskulls are playing your D.C. games and you can't get a speaker elected, that means we don't get to secure the border. We don't get to push back against the Chinese Communist Party. We don't get to roll back these ridiculous regulations. Let's get to work. The message Donald Trump shared is the exact same message that everybody back home has been telling me, and that is get to work.
Well, as you know, Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, Congressman Mike Walz have been tapped to join the Trump administration. That makes the Republican margin even narrower, at least initially. How confident are you that you're going to be able to get that lofty agenda that you just talked about done? Border security, for example. We know that President-elect Trump really wants to tackle that first.
I want to tell you that it's going to be easy. It's not going to be easy. There are days it is going to be pretty complicated, but I remain convinced that almost every single Republican on almost every single issue shares ideologically what they want the end goal to be. Our biggest disagreements are at a tactical level, and the good news is reasonable people can work their way through tactics. That's what we have been doing, and that's what we will continue to do.
But there's really no room for error. I mean, to get anything passed, you basically need everyone to be on board. And after what we saw today, isn't that a warning that it might be an uphill battle?
Oh, what a negative Nelly you are. I mean, let's focus on the big picture here, and that is people said we couldn't get Mike Johnson elected Speaker on the first ballot, and we did. Now, it wasn't always smooth, but the reality is when it counted, we delivered a success, and that's exactly what we're going to do week in and week out around here.
Let me read you a little bit of what Speaker Johnson said on the list of commitments that he put out. It read in part, if we don't follow through on our campaign promise for fiscal responsibility, we don't deserve to hold power. The national debt is a grave threat to America's economic and national security, and no issue exemplifies the Congress's failure more. I have to tell you, President-elect Trump's tax cuts cost more than $9 trillion, would add about $9 trillion to the national debt. How do you square those two?
The math is going to be daunting, but here's one thing we know. You simply cannot balance the budget over the course of 10 years if you don't have the growth of the American economy at 3.5%. And so, listen, people may want to raise corporate taxes and soak the rich guys. The reality is we don't have low corporate taxes in this country. In fact, our taxes before the Trump tax cuts were the highest in the OECD, or the developed nations. Right now, they're only in the middle of the pack. So for people who want to jack the taxes, that's fine. But you're going to be sending a message to the marketplace that they should go do business almost anywhere else other than America. Now, we can get this done. We're going to need to cut some spending. There's a lot of Green New Deal garbage that, frankly, should be first on the chopping block. We absolutely can keep the lower taxes for American families in place while we are making important progress toward balancing this budget.
Very quickly, a quick process question. Big debate boiling over whether you should address the border as a standalone package or whether you should try to get tax cuts done. The argument is if you don't extend the Trump-era tax cuts, those 2017 tax cuts now, it's only going to get tougher. Do you think they should be combined or should there be a standalone border package?
I've got strongly held opinions on this, but I'm not going to share them. I mean, I'm in the room where we're strategically... No, I'm in the room trying to strategically figure out which way to go. I'm not going to negotiate against my own team in public. We're going to make a decision together, and then we're going to go execute together.
All right. Well, Congressman Dusty Johnson, really appreciate your joining us on a very big day there on Capitol Hill. Appreciate it. Happy New Year to you.
Thank you.
And joining me now, our panel, Shelby Talcott, reporter for Semaphore, Faiz Shakir, senior advisor to Senator Bernie Sanders, Matt Gorman, former communications advisor to the Tim Scott presidential campaign, and Sarah Chamberlain, president and CEO of the Republican Main Street Partnership. Shelby, let me start with you. What a day on Capitol Hill. House Speaker Mike Johnson did, in fact, hold on to the gavel. He did, in fact, do it in one vote, but it got pretty messy, and you had those three defections. Basically, it seems like trying to send a signal that they could block him if they wanted to in the future.
Yeah, to be clear, I think obviously Speaker Johnson won the vote, but this was a win for Donald Trump overall. And that is a big reason why Speaker Johnson won the vote. As we've said, he was calling lawmakers and actively getting them on board. But this doesn't mean that Speaker Johnson is out of the red zone, right? And going forward, they have made it clear, these lawmakers, Chip Roy out with a statement afterwards with nearly a dozen lawmakers basically saying, we voted for you because of Donald Trump, not necessarily because we think you've done a great job for the past 15 months. And so that sort of should be a warning sign for Speaker Johnson. This is probably going to be his easiest day.
It's such a great point, Matt Gorman, because you basically have this faction of House Republicans who are saying we're not necessarily going to go along with the entire MAGA agenda. So it was a victory for President-elect Trump today, but also a sign, and you heard Dusty Johnson acknowledge as much, that it could be tough sledding moving forward.
What's telling to me is that if Trump wants to get his priorities done, he needs to be the one, like today, leading the way and making sure that every lawmaker that they need is on board. That's the way they can get immigration, taxes, and energy through. Without it, it's going to be very, very tough sledding. And one of the other things I thought was interesting, too, clearly Mike Johnson has learned from the McCarthy months, if you will. I wouldn't call it be a year. He didn't open up the store and start horse trading because suddenly by doing that, it would cause a cascade of other things. But the biggest takeaway, in my opinion, is Trump needs to be the lead blocker for Mike Johnson going forward today and other days for any priorities in the House.
Sarah, how do you see this playing out?
First of all, Dusty Johnson is quite modest. He played a huge role in this, as did the Republican Main Street Partnership Caucus, of which he chairs. They will be playing a huge role in the next 2 years. Yes, Donald Trump would be very important, but Main Street's over 100 members, and they very much have a seat at the table, and they'll be working on this.
What do you think the takeaway, Sarah, is from today, the fact that you basically are seeing these two factions play out? We should say that, look, House Speaker Mike Johnson, it's going to be tougher to oust him now in the wake of this new rules package, 9 votes as opposed to 1. So that's significant. It gives him some cover. But again, to get anything past the debt ceiling raised, for example, is going to be really tough.
It's going to be tough. We may have to go to the Democrats a little bit, but the hope is that we can do this as a solid Republican Party moving forward. I will tell you, the Republican Main Street Partnership members used to kind of cave a little bit. They don't do that anymore. And I think that's why you see the change in the package, and that's why I think you saw the change today in the votes.
I want to play a little bit of what Hakeem Jeffries had to say, Faz, and get your reaction on the other side.
It's time for us to come together and finally lower the high cost of living in the United States of America once and for all. And we will work with anyone of any party to get that done. We will work with anyone to secure our borders and we will work with anyone to fix our broken immigration system.
Couple of takeaways for me, Faiz. First of all, he sounded a little bit like Bernie Sanders there, talking about the high cost of living. But second of all, saying, yeah, we want to work together.
Well, on the economy, on the high cost of living, it's important because the Republicans yet haven't figured out what the problem is they're trying to solve. You got an economy that's growing at 3.5%, that Dusty Johnson said. So you've got unemployment fairly low. You've got corporate profits at pretty strong highs, market doing well. So what problem are you actually trying to solve? What they want to tell you is we got to cut entitlement spending. We don't like the growth of government, but they won't tell you that. So what we're going to get into is a tax debate and a cuts debate in which they have to figure out what problem are you trying to solve? Because the problem that Hakeem Jeffries laid out is the problem that people want, the high cost of living. What are you going to do about my housing, my prescription drugs, my child care, my credit card interest rates? There's nothing on the agenda about that.
When you hear that as a Democrat, do you think that's the message that should have been the biggest message for all of 2024?
Now you put it on a tee for me, having heard me say this for months, being angry for months, like saying, hey, focus on the economy, focus on working class issues and a fight with, embrace that fight with corporate America. Right now, they are doing phenomenally well. They don't need tax breaks. They're going to offer tax breaks to corporate America. No, that's not what they want. Middle class families are just looking for somebody who's going to get prices under control for them. You do that a variety of different ways, those junk fees issues that we were talking about, going after monopolists and really producing more in this country, bringing back jobs and supply chains to America, which we were on the track of doing here.
Matt, do you think that there's a possibility that Democrats and Republicans can potentially work together on some bipartisan priorities in this new Congress?
Sure. I mean, look, I have to laugh. I kept thinking, like, what year is this? I mean, talking about cutting the cost of living, like that was why you lost the election, Joe Biden. But no, I think, yes, look, there's 12 or 13 Democrats in Trump districts that need to have some sort of moderation if they want to win. There are only 3 Harris Republicans. That's going to be a key factor going forward that I'm looking at.
Sarah, what about you? You think it's possible?
I totally agree with you. It has to be, because there's a whole group of Republicans that I'm going to call them rhinos. They're really not Republicans. They don't want to vote for leadership. They don't necessarily support Donald Trump. So you're going to have to work with some of the Democrats.
Shelby, on this point, I'll give you the final word because we only have about a minute left. In my interview with Donald Trump, he said he wants to get a deal on Dreamers, potentially. He said actually cutting entitlements is off the table. What do you see any areas where, in the next 2 years, we could actually see some type of deal made?
Yeah, I think certainly on the border, Democrats have acknowledged that the situation at the border is untenable and needs to change. I think with the Dreamers, that is another area in which both parties seem willing to negotiate some sort of a deal. But I also think it's going to be really difficult because, remember, the reason that the spending bill blew up was in part because we had a lot of Republicans complain that too much was given to Democrats, that the bill was too hefty, that it gave too many concessions. And so it's going to be a really fine line with figuring that out.
All right. Great Friday conversation. Thank you all. Great to see you all. Happy New Year to everyone. Thank you for being here on a very busy day. We will be back on Monday with more Meet the Press Now. And if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press on your local NBC stations. I'll have interviews with Senate Minority Leaders Chuck Schumer, Senate Majority Leader John Thune, and Senator Adam Schiff. Don't miss it. The news continues with Yasmin Vesuvian and for Hallie Jackson right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.